Welcome back to the channel. Today I am finally able to finish up the front subframe for the Charger as well as the front lower control arm. So I have been waiting for some parts that I designed from Sencut Sen to be cut, and they're finally here. So everything for the oil pan plus everything for the front subframe and the lower control arms are here. So we can finally get everything ready so we can put the drivetrain into the Charger, which after everything is welded up, I'll just have to have the subframe powder coated, and then I'll Cerakote the lower control arms and the rest of the stuff. I want to Cerakote the front knuckles because the aluminum gets really dingy after a while, as well as the rear knuckles and a bunch of other odds and ends. We have all the misalignment spacers thanks to Aaron Rue. Big shout out to Sencut Sen. They have been, pretty much helping out the channel. There is a link in the description as well as a discount code, so just check them out if you need anything cut. Very, very convenient. All the oil pan parts, they bend stuff, they powder coat stuff, they'll tap it, they also deburr it. Everything comes out very clean, ready to go, ready to weld. So let's get to work on this and finally get the last few things, which is the sway bar, finished up on the subframe. Spent pretty much all day yesterday making these. I thought they were pretty nice sway bar mounts. But then I came today and for some reason I really didn't like how they looked. And I really didn't like how they were fitting. Plus I had the subframe lifted up higher so I could get the sway bar to line up with everything. And then these are way too low. So, or you can see how much, how much lower they are than the splash shield would be. So today's a new day. We're redesigning the sway bar mounts. This shouldn't be this difficult, but I guess it is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it so these are flat, kind of like this, and then have everything plated in, kind of like I did here, but more flat, so I don't have to worry about it protruding so far beneath the car. I now have the redesign of the sway bar mounts finished, and I really love how they came out. I love how this whole subframe came out, but what I want to do once I get the 3D scanner is I want to scan the front end of the car. I also want to scan the subframe, the differential, the engine, everything, and then design a subframe in SolidWorks just so I can get stuff. It fit, and how I did it worked out really, really well. But in SolidWorks or in CAD programs, you can really get everything fine-tuned. I can also mess with the wall thickness, so everything is 120 wall on this, which makes it a lot heavier. But the fact is, this subframe is lighter than the factory subframe that comes in the Charger, so I'm already saving weight. But if I could reduce the wall thickness and still have rigidity, that would be really nice, because then I could have a unit that is lighter and still gonna perform. I also kind of want to redesign these. These are kind of sticking out, but the sway bar really just makes sure the suspension from side to side is the same. So we're trying to stay the same. So that's what the sway bar kind of does, the lower control arms. It makes sure they're even. But I don't think I'll have any issues. It is wrapped around the tube right here on the bottom, all these sides, except for this side, but I don't think I have to add any additional bracing. Plus they're really nice and tucked up. So the splash shield is here, sway bar mount is here. I won't have any issues with it hitting the drive shaft. So I'm not gonna be able to use the factory Hellcat sway bar. I could use it. Technically, everything would work. It just wouldn't be as stiff, which isn't really that big of an issue. I could go with a larger upgraded bar. But then even at that point, this hanging off of here, for one, it really doesn't look good. For two, the sway bar really isn't in the correct position here, and I can't change that. So I was like, well, I could put these bushings on the inside, get this closer, it'd be a lot nicer and tidier. But even at the same time, we're not extending this. Nothing sway bar wise is changing. So where it's supposed to be bolted is on the strut. And if you're bolted to the strut with a sway bar, you're at like a 0.95 to 1 ratio. But since it's so close here, I would say that's probably like a 3.5 to 1 or something. It's not going to be very effective at all, or maybe it reduces it or something like that. Maybe it's 0.25, whatever. It's not going to work very well. So I tried to mount it to the front to see if it was going to be any closer, and it just put everything in a weird spot. Really wasn't working well. It was a little bit, you know, it was a little bit farther, you know, in, but it really wasn't any further out, which I still couldn't get it to bolt to the strut mount. So then I looked in the junkyard for some sway bars, and I was like, well, maybe I'll try an RX-8, because I looked at my aftermarket one on the RX-7 in there, and I was like, well, that one looks kind of good. Let's try an RX-8 one. So the RX-8 one is actually a really nice width. I like how wide it is, and I put these bushings on the inside, which would have gave me a really nice mounting. Was really pumped about that, but then we run into this problem right here. It's not really that big of a problem because I can mount it lower, but we're gonna have some steering rack interference issues because of where the sway bar is at. So I was like, well, we can't use that, and it's still not getting us to the strut. What should I do now? So then I went out and I was like, maybe I'll try a GT Mustang. Grabbed the GT Mustang sway bar, and lo and behold, the GT Mustang sway bar would work, but it's way too long, which is like the exact opposite of everything that I'm working with right now. So the GT sway bar, literally mounted at the front or the back, was protruding like way back here. So it's getting me in the same position as I'd be with a shorter sway bar like this. So then I was like, what other car is pretty heavy and they have like a sport version of it? And I was like, an Audi. So I looked at an A6, which out of all of them, it's kind of like the RX-8. It's straight right there, which really helps with oil pan, because when it turns and pivots, it's not going to have a hump like this one or the Hellcat one. Obviously, they don't move very much, but that is a plus. And it's in between the length of the Mustang, as you can see right there, and the length of a Hellcat or an RX-8 one. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some bushings. That's a 30mm sway bar. Stock Hellcat is a 32mm sway bar. There are aftermarket upgraded ones where I could go up or down, which is really nice. I'm not sure how the car is going to handle, and if it understeers or oversteers. I'd rather have it oversteering, but you have to reduce or increase the sway bar and you know, the sway bar thickness slash spring rate. So we're going to use the A6 one. The bushings on it aren't ideal because they're kind of like the Hellcat ones. They have this weird thing that bulges out, because like on the Hellcat ones, or the Hellcat sway bar, it has this weird bushing like this. And the reason they have this weird bushing is because it has to cover a hole, because on the factory Hellcats, it covers a bolt for the lower control arm. So now I think I'll be able to, I'm not going to cut it off yet, but I'll be able to get rid of this monstrosity, even though it took me a long time to make, and make them really nice and fit in there perfectly. I'll be able to get rid of that. I'll then have the sway bar in the front, which will free up space in the back, which this wasn't taking up really any room. It just looks, to me, it looks bad. It doesn't give me the correct suspension, geometry, etc. So let's start fitting. Actually, let's try to find some bushings, some 30mm normal sway bar bushings. I called a few parts stores and none of them said they had these. Then I went and actually was able to buy these today instead of ordering them online. So these are just like Energy Suspension's universal bushings. They have a zerd on the back so you can grease them really easily. And I think they're going to work out really well with the Audi A6 sway bar. After 4 different redesigns, I now have the sway bar mount on the front of the subframe, and the only concern I have about this whole situation is we have an Audi part on the Charger, and Audis, they love to break down. So hopefully this isn't a curse, but I'm really happy with how this came out, how nice and tucked in it is. I can also still utilize the electric power steering wiring bracket, fits perfectly. And I just love how we have these aftermarket bushings. I can grease them. The sway bar actually tucks up a lot nicer than the Hellcat one, so I'm not gonna have to worry about any tire rubbing the sway bar. As you can see right there, the sway bars on the Hellcats just love to get rubbed by the tire when you're at full lock drifting them. But Now we have a sway bar that works. Also down here, it's nice and tucked up. It has this little recess that worked out really well. So it goes under the control arm and then it comes out right here. And I'm gonna have to make something similar to this or end up using this and just go like that. Either have it go to the control arm or go to the coilover. We'll figure that out once the subframe and the engine and everything is in the car. But I thought I had some more inch Dom, or not inch Dom, but inch chromoly. So I was gonna take this up to Hayden to have him finish tigging the sway bar mounts in the back, and then I decided to change it. I'm really happy that I did, because now I'll have him do these Monday. He's off at a race, so over the weekend. So Monday he'll be back. I'll take this up there, have him TIG everything. Then we can go get it powder coated finally. And I'm gonna be very, very happy once this thing is finally actually powder coated in the car with the engine, because this has been such a huge undertaking, and I'm just happy that it has turned out as good as it has, just like the rear subframe that's already in the car. But I do plan on doing most likely a redesign. I want to do something different with the steering rack, but this will be perfect. It will make it so it runs and drives. And then also Monday, I want to take up the oil pan. So in the next video, I'm going to be fabricating the new oil pan. I have everything from Sencut Sen. Big shout out to Sencut Sen. Even though all the stuff that I had cut by them for the rear sway bar mount, I ended up cutting up to utilize for the front sway bar mount, because I designed it for the rear. It wouldn't work in the front, but it still came out really, really nice. So let's get that rear mount cut off, get everything out of the subframe, get it ready. The rear of the subframe is now looking much better that I got rid of those sway bar mounts in the back. So this gives me a lot more room when I mount turbochargers on the car. I'm not gonna have this big boxy sway bar. Plus, it was probably a lot weaker than what I made in the front. So this is nice and tucked in. It uses a sway bar that I can increase the diameter or decrease it depending on how the car is handling. Plus, it puts me in a pretty good location for a pickup. So I'm not gonna have to worry about, you know, the Hellcat one was gonna be like almost right coming off of this pickup point for the lower control arm, and it probably wasn't gonna be very effective. But now we have something that's going to be pretty tunable, and if the car understeers or oversteers, I'm going to be able to really adjust it. They make a few aftermarket versions, since the A6 is kind of a desirable car and people do throw sway bars and track them, which I do plan on taking the Hellcat to the mountains, to the track, to the drag strip, etc. So very happy that all this came together and is finally to the point where I need to take it up to Hayden and have it finish, having him TIG weld a bunch of stuff. And then once it is done being TIG welded, I can actually finally get it powder coated, which is going to be awesome. I'm so excited about this, because this has been a huge project. The rear subframe was a big one, but the front subframe just has so much more going on with the steering rack and all the other components that are up there, plus the sway bar mount being in a different location. The Trackhawk one I left in the factory location and it fit perfectly, but very excited about this. So I'm going to end the video here. Super stoked that this thing is finally ready to go. I can't wait to see it in gloss black powder coat, which is coming. I'll probably have that done next week, because Hayden is at a race over the weekend. He'll be back Monday. I'll finish up fabricating the oil pan tomorrow. So I'm going to throw the differential into the subframe as well as the steering rack, and then bolt the engine back in there and then fabricate that really quick, which will be really awesome, because once the oil pan's done, once the subframe's done, like I've said before, we can throw in the Hellcat swap and finally have the rear drive shaft bolted in and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to end the video here. If you like these videos, make sure to click the subscribe button, thumbs up, throw a comment below. As always, see you guys next time.